about my favorite topic. But first, let's look at today's metaphor. Today's metaphor is about campfires. And as you can see here, a famous artist called Laurie Anderson said, technology is the campfire around which we tell stories. And this is so true. But here we will say charts is the campfire around which you tell your stories. Yes, good. So, this chapter is about how to use maps for teamwork, and this is related to the group IQ. So how can you use maps, visuals, charts for teamwork? And we will see three cases. First one is Wardley maps. Then we will see Toyota's A3 PDCA, and then we will see the business canvas. So let's start with Wardley maps. Probably Wardley maps has been the biggest innovation in the last 10 years after or even before the business canvas model of Alexander Osterwalder. Wardley maps was invented by a guy that lives in London. His name is Simon Wardley. And they organize every year map camp in London. And I totally recommend you assist and join this map camp if you're in London. So what is a Wardley map? A Wardley map maps the value chain of a business on a vertical axis, but also looks at the commoditization trend of each component of your value chain. For example, if I ask you to place a car in the x-axis, where would you place a car today? I give you 5 seconds. Well, at the beginning of the century, there were like 400 car companies. So car was in its genesis. And this is typical when you have a genesis product, you have lots of companies and there's no standards of cars. So at the beginning, cars were very different in shape and price as well, mostly for the luxury market. Then in the 50s, you had the custom built cars, and then came Ford Model T, which kind of industrialized and commoditized the car. And today, if you think about the car, we can say that the car is between here and here because there is basically no difference between cars. They're pretty reliable. They don't break down as in the 80s. They're pretty reliable. They drive very well, all of them. If we blindfold a person and we put them inside a Kia or an Audi, they will not be able to tell us where they are because Kia and Audi source the same components, have the same engineers. So it's pretty commoditized these days. Make sense? So Genesis, custom built products, when you have a product rental and when you have a commodity. So electricity, water, these are commodities today, but they were not commodities 200 years ago. Good. Right, so here's another Wardley map, and this is a more complex one. And this is the example that Simon Wardley uses in his book, which is freely available on the internet. And for a website he used to work with, which name was Photango. It was a photo sharing website. So here you can see all the components, starting by what do you need to make a website work? Well, you need electricity power, you need compute units, you need a data center, you need a software platform, you need a CRM, you need a website, you need a payment gateway, you need an online photo storage, and an online manipulation tool. And those are the components of the web app that was Photango. And so look here, there's some components which are closer to commodity than other components. And so those are opportunities to innovate the business model. And here you can decide, for example, whether you should outsource this part of the value chain to some company in India, or whether to invest more, or whether to protect it with patents, or whether to attack a competitor in a weak point. If you look at a car, for example, and we explode its components, we could, in theory, map the value chain or map a car in a Wardley map. So if we do that, we'll have a cloud of points and things. But basically, we will end up with a supply chain which is fairly standardized these days, and internal combustion engine and parts which are mostly standardized because the suppliers are the same for Toyota than they are for Volkswagen. So engine parts, supply chain, quite standardized thing. And then what else do we have? We have software like the electronic control unit, the navigation software, which most of the time is outsourced to companies like Denso, Toyota, and Panasonic. Then you have the car assembly, and then you have a distribution network, the sales shops, yes. And then you have the car. And if you unite all these components, more or less, you have mapped the value chain of a car. And this is a great exercise to have a discussion of whether to outsource things, whether the value chain is improvable, or where to innovate, or where are the weak points of the competition. So here's your first exercise. I would ask you to map the Tesla company. How would it look like?